I own a small business. I'm also employed by a small business to run that business. Both businesses have been suffering tremendously. We're called the job creators. I can't create a job. We're being hammered by healthcare costs. In 2008, the healthcare for my small business increased by 26%. In 2009, it increased by 22%. This last year, it increased by 25% every year, because as a small business, the person running for my employer, I can't afford healthcare for my own small business. But for the full-time job I have, every year it's a scramble to find another healthcare plan and to cut coverage and to increase deductibles. So small businesses are being hammered by that. So yes, we do need healthcare reform. And I'm not a Tea Party member. I am a member of MoveOn.org, and I came to that through a long, painful examination of where this country is going. So, I mean, small businesses have the healthcare issues that they're dealing with in terms of insurance, and we're losing customers. My own small business went from maybe generating an extra $30,000 a year in income to almost zero, because my customers can't afford my services. And the company that I run, which is IT Consulting, our clients are Credit Suisse, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch. They're not holding on to all their money, folks. It's going to jobs in India, in China, to Asia. What are we doing to repatriate those jobs?
Thank you.
I was glad to see your point.
Thank you. For the sake of the recording, Al asked me that I repeat your question. Your question was related to healthcare and the fact that as a small business person, it is impossible for you to hire because of the uncertainty, particularly regarding healthcare. First of all, I want to thank you for being here, and I think that this proves, ladies and gentlemen, that whether you're a member of the Tea Party movement or a member of MoveOn.org, we are Americans first, and many of the issues, if we just talk through them, I think there will be greater agreement than cable television sometimes suggests. So, to answer your question specifically, and you and I may disagree, but I did not vote for the President's health care bill. But I do favor what I've suggested: tort reform, purchase of policies across state lines, pooling together of like-minded small businesses. I come from a small business background. My late father and my twin brother and I practiced law together. I'm prohibited from practicing law as a member of Congress. That is a good thing. But my twin brother, a graduate of Lafayette College, faces the same challenges you face in purchase of his own health care, and so I'm sympathetic, and I've given you what I think I would do. The gentleman who's vigorously raising his hand.
I work for Horizon Blue Cross, Bob Egan Summit. You're going to get more increases with the Healthcare Reform Act. The regulations that are coming down are unbelievable. And it's going to cost, and it's going to come right down to you. For those regulations and all the requirements associated with the healthcare reform, it's going to come on us, and it's going to come on you. Believe me, that's the truth, I think. I don't want to get into specific facts, but
I think it just responds to that base representative.
Well, I respect both points of view. I did not vote for the health care bill. I do favor the reforms I have suggested, and I hope the Supreme Court at an early date takes up the issue. The gentleman next to the gentleman who just spoke.
Alfredo Serini, Springfield, New Jersey, kind of tying into what this gentleman said, is regulation. I think a lot of people in this room believe, like I do, have burdened us for way too long. There was the Reducing Regulatory Burdens Act that was just in the House, and yes. I believe it went to the Senate. That I don't know.
I don't think it's passed the Senate.
Can you discuss that just for 2 seconds and how you voted and why?
Yes, well, I have to check the record, but I believe I voted yes. But we will check the record. I don't want ever to speak without full checking the record, and I have staff here who will check the record. I favor lowering burdens on businesses in America, particularly in this economic environment. And I would urge the Senate to pass the series of bills that we passed in the House. And incidentally, if the Senate has a good proposal, then bring it over to us in the House. The Senate has not passed a budget in several years.
800 days.
How does that tie in with regulation? Regulation?
Certainty. The fact that there's no certainty in Washington as to how much we're going to spend or whether we're going to be operating under ad hoc continuing resolutions.
How
The
can
gentleman,
you provide certainty? Give me an explanation of how you would provide certainty.
not raising taxes. I'm against raising tax rates. I am for tax reform, and I favor an early resolution of the healthcare debate by the Supreme Court. Now, that's not the only ones, but they come to mind. The gentleman in the red shirt with the American flag.
Thank you. My name is Nicholas Santos from Baskin Ridge. With the deep redistricting, I'm not sure if you're my representative or not. Freedom has Anyway, I'm wearing a flag because I do the flags on the highways in this region. With the Morristown Tea Party since its beginning. One very simple question. To what degree do you personally and do your colleagues believe that the president is trying to overwhelm the system?
I'm asked to repeat the question. The question was, to what extent do my colleagues or I believe the president is trying to overwhelm the system? Pardon me?
Well, just generally, I'll clarify my question. To just generally overwhelm our system of freedom, free enterprise, and individual liberty, all the things that the Tea Party we believe in. How much is he trying to? What you personally, colleagues, how many of your colleagues believe that the president is trying to overrun the system?
Thank you. I will attempt to answer the question. First of all, if you are in Basking Ridge, are you in Bernards Township, sir?
Yes.
I'll try to answer that question first. I appreciate the opportunity to answer one question at a time, and I'll try to answer that question. I have the responsibility, I think, and I always try to point out whom I represent and whom I don't. Congressman Frelinghuysen, my close friend, is currently the representative for Bernards Township. The congressman represents Bernards Township, Somerville, Raritan Borough, and half of Bridgewater Township in Somerset County. I have the honor of representing 16 and a half municipalities in Somerset County. And then in Franklin Township, that is Congressman Holt, and I think Congressman Pallone may have a little section of it. But I represent almost all of Somerset County, but not Bernards Township. Let me say, in Bridgewater Township, I represent the pretty sections of Bridgewater Township. Rodney disagrees with that, obviously. He represents the Bridgewater Mall. I believe that the president's policies his first year in office were based on a political philosophy that he felt that government could be responsive to the concerns of the American people. And while I think that government is in some ways essential, I did not support what I would say were his overarching policies, the health care bill and the stimulus package. Now, there is a debate on the stimulus package. My view is that it did not work. Now, what the president signed into law last week was cuts in spending, and there were no tax increases, although he initially suggested that that would be part of the agreement. So I hope moving forward that the committee of 12 will concentrate on cuts over time. My philosophy is different from the president. I do not disparage him or the office he holds. I voted for Senator McCain, and I'm confident in the vote I cast. My side didn't win. Next year, I would hope that Governor Christie might run for president of the United States. But if he doesn't, then there are 7 or 8 Republicans who are currently in Iowa on the hustings. So my political views are different from the president's in many
You didn't answer my
areas.
question.
Well, I did my best.
No, you didn't. You avoided the answer.
Pardon me?
You avoided the answer. I'm asking you, is that the president intentionally trying to overwhelm the system? You can
Well, I
say-
think the
you can
health care
say yes or
bill.
no. You can say yes or no.
I think the health care bill overwhelms the system to the extent that I do not think that it's good public policy. I want to reform health care, but in his signature issue, I do not favor that. The gentleman here.
Yeah, Leonard Berkowitz, Berkeley Heights, I'm an independent. You talked about companies being able to bring profits back to the U.S. without paying taxes. Well, it seems to me that gives them an incentive to keep putting jobs overseas because they can make profits there and avoid taxes.
Yeah, yes, I'm not sure I said without paying taxes. I said in some way to repatriate the funds. I'm not sure it would be complete elimination of those.
What would be a reduction?
I'm willing to examine all ways, Mr. Berkowitz, that would repatriate the funds here, and I'm certainly willing to listen to proposals you have. I do know, as fact, that they're not repatriating the funds now, and we certainly have to do something, and I'm certainly willing to listen to suggestions you might have, but I want to create more American jobs. Yes.
Yes, my name is Anne Ray. I'm from Montclair, and I'm from Yvonne. What about the standard? Stand up.
Can't hear you. Stand up.
Anne Ray, Montclair, move on. I'm just curious about the Standards and Poor's comment on our political problems in Washington, D.C. It seems to be having a very negative effect on the stock market and our economy. And I think that we need a government that gets along and makes decisions. And I also, just a general statement, how can business people create jobs if there's no demand? No one's going to hire somebody to do make work. We need to create demand.
Yes, thank you for your question. I'm asked to repeat the question because you don't have a microphone. It's not your fault. The question was to comment on the S&P downgrade and its discussion within the downgrade on the political climate in Washington and how we should create jobs. I believe that was the gist of the question. Regarding, I'd like to first answer this lady's question. I promise I will try to recognize those whose hands are raised. I think S&P was a warning sign, but let me say I'm pleased that both Moody's and Fitch's did downgrade the AAA rating of the United States. And on the first business day after the downgrade, and the downgrade came after the markets had closed on Friday, on the first business day, Monday, there was a flight of funds into Treasury bills, ladies and gentlemen. And that is because, and Governor Christie said this, and I agree with him, we are going to pay our bills on time in the United States, and we're going to pay the interest on T-bills. So, did S&P overreact? I don't know. I said on my website in a press statement that I made that it was a warning sign that chickens had come home to roost. I believe that it is important to have political dialogue in Washington, and what we voted on last week was ultimately a compromise. and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but those with whom I met this afternoon of the MoveOn.org organization, many did not favor voting positively on that compromise. I did vote yes. There were 66 Republicans who voted no. There were 95 Democrats who voted no. I am elected and I vote, and I voted yes. I certainly didn't think it was perfect, but I did not want to default. Now, I think S&P should examine what's going to happen moving forward on this bipartisan committee, and to whether they can agree to a proposal that will then be voted up or down by us in Congress. So I think it's a work in progress. And if they cannot agree, then a balanced budget amendment has to pass, which will be very difficult, as I have explained. And then if that does not happen, there is a sequestration, which is very serious, of about $1.2 trillion. And that sequestration is not only in social programs domestic spending, it's also in Pentagon spending. Sequestration is a very serious matter. And the bill was written last week so that we might not get to sequestration. We will get to sequestration if one or two doesn't happen. But so those would be my comments. Now, yes, sir. Yes.
Yes, hi, Jim Lefkowitz, Somerset County Tea Party. I live in Boundbrook, New Jersey.
I think we've knocked on doors together.
We sure did, Congressman, we sure did. My question to you would be, and I'm glad that it was brought up about the credit downgrade. And I know in the MoveOn.org email asking people to come to this meeting, the Tea Party was referred to as Tea Party terrorists, and that the downgrade was a Tea Party downgrade. So we saw that in the emails from MoveOn.org, and we're seeing it in the media now. My question to you would be, in the House kitchenette, when you guys are sitting around having coffee, what's your, how do you guys feel about that? What was the Tea Party influence?
I think
what's reality versus what we're hearing, Congressman?
The question was the comment that some have called Tea Party members terrorists. I'm paraphrasing here. And when we were in the House discussing matters, what was our view of the influence of the Tea Party? Is that roughly the question?
That's correct, yes.
Yes. Well, I'll answer them in reverse order. I think that the primary motivation of the Tea Party movement in this country is fiscal responsibility. Yes. I believe that is the view of the Republican members of Congress in both houses and the Senate. I don't know necessarily the view of the Democratic members. I'm giving you my views and the views of those on our side of the aisle. I reject out of hand the notion that those who are members of the Tea Party or those who are members of MoveOn.org or any other organization of citizens, ladies and gentlemen, is in any way terrorist. I reject that out of hand, ladies and gentlemen. A columnist for the New York Times, I think, said that in a column, and
Joe Biden said it.
And he had to apologize. So my views are as I have stated, and I believe the primary motivation of the Tea Party movement is fiscal responsibility. The gentleman in the black T-shirt.
Thank you. With your opening remarks, pardon me, I'm Fred Taylor. I'm with the Morristown Tea Party. I live in Union. In your opening remarks, you stated that you think the best way to reduce the deficit is to basically create more taxpayers.
Yes.
What happened to the notion of constitutional government? Most of the money that the federal government spends is on things that it's not really authorized to spend. address that.
Yes, well, I obviously believe that the federal government is a government of limited power, and that power that is not specifically granted to the federal government is reposed in the states and the people themselves under the 10th Amendment. I come at my views from having served in the General Assembly, and then more recently in the State Senate, where for 4 years I was the minority leader. So my views on this are based upon my experience in a state capital, and I believe that much of the activity that is performed by government should be performed at the state level and then at sub-jurisdictions locally. And that doesn't mean there is not a role for the federal government. There clearly is, but I believe that the role of the federal government is defined by the Constitution.
Would you then support the nullification movement on states to nullify unconstitutional laws?
I favor constitutional decisions by the Supreme Court, and I have...
That's what the Tea Party is about. The Tea Party is about returning to the Constitution of the United States. This fiscal responsibility is only a part of that.
Yeah. I believe in a limited and constitutional role for the federal government. This gentleman right here.
Well, just a point to make. If we went back to the original, my name is Peter Hoffman. I'm from Maplewood, New Jersey. I am not in this district. I'm here with MoveOn.org. If we followed the original Constitution of the United States, we would still have slavery.
I'll be happy to answer to the best of my ability. Slavery was a horrible institution. It was a stain on... I'll be happy to try to answer your question, and the audience can agree with my answer or disagree with my answer, but I've been asked to give you my answer. Slavery was a horrible stain on the United States, and thank God, under the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, slavery was abolished. And when I am asked who is my favorite president, and I have great respect for modern presidents like Dwight Eisenhower and Ronald Reagan, my favorite president is Abraham. Joey. And who are you and where are you from?
Joseph Novick, a proud constituent of Congressman Leonard Lance, and a supporter of many things that you have supported in the past. One question, not to change the subject. I do want to make one thing perfectly clear, to quote a former president. MoveOn.org, Democrats, and as a proud progressive liberal Democrat, we are also very concerned about fiscal responsibility. The issue is certainly where we choose to spend the money, not just to cut everything across the board. Trillion-dollar wars, sending jobs overseas, not having corporations pay their taxes, are all fiscal irresponsibility, which I know that you have been very strong working on. So it's certainly not only the Tea Party, it's not only Republicans, it's certainly people like myself and other MoveOn.org people here who definitely support fiscal responsibility. Now, excuse me, I'm asking a question. Now, to change the subject, I want to change the subject with regard to oil and energy independence. You, in your plan, I've heard you speak about this before, drilling off the coast of New Jersey. Question, do you favor, if they discovered oil off the coast of New Jersey, because you favor the drilling of oil off the Gulf Coast, and we saw what happened, I guess, about a year ago or so with a horrible oil spill, are you in favor, as I know you've been a strong environmentalist in the past, being supported by the Sierra Club, etc., are you in favor of drilling for oil off the coast of New Jersey?
Yes, and that's it. Get it over with. Let the answer.
Governor Christie is opposed to that, and I tend to agree with Governor Christie. I think the major sources of oil are in the Gulf of Mexico and other places, and so I want to concentrate on those other places. Yes.
Can I just say, this is a Tea Party meeting. Can we have the next question from a Tea Party person?
Dick Forsheimer, Florida Park, New Jersey, a member of the Morristown Tea Party.
Yes, sir.
How do you stand on the flat tax?
Flat tax. Now, that is the tax that has just one rate. I tend to favor what was the great advance in 1986. President Reagan on one side and Speaker of the House Tip O'Neill, I think, and certainly Senator Bradley of New Jersey on the other, had two rates. It was 15% and 28%. And I would hope if we have tax reform, we have to eliminate some loopholes, that we might go back to those two rates. The Tea Party. Are you in my district?
No.
No.
I was asking.
We'll move.
I'll take your question, and then I hope.
All right, let's hold it down.
I will take your question, and then I hope the next question might be somebody in the district I represent. Yes.
The Democrats and the Republicans voted for this raising ceiling bill.
Yes.
Which means it funded healthcare. What do you think the Supreme Court is going to decide when the case comes before them if the representatives of the country voted to fund the healthcare bill?
Well,
a judge that wants to find it illegal cannot do it.
I respectfully disagree with that. I think the Supreme Court will rule on the health care issue based upon the Commerce Clause. I'll be happy to finish answering your question, sir. I think the Supreme Court will rule on the health care bill based upon the Commerce Clause as to whether it's constitutional for the Congress to require the purchase of a private product. And I think it will be a closely divided issue, and I've given you my views. I don't think that the Supreme Court would rule based upon what's currently in law. That's why we have a Supreme Court to rule on whether the law that has been passed, which I voted against, is constitutional or unconstitutional. Yes, sir.
Yes, Congressman, I'm Mike Roundtree, a member of Americans for Prosperity and also of the Basking Ridge Tea Party. I am one of your constituents in Bernardsville. We've talked several times, yes, and I do respect and appreciate your turning out to a public meeting, unlike a couple of our senators. Having said that, I do question why, given the meltdown, and as a result of essentially all of the spending cuts being in the out years, when Congress probably will not, if past is any indication of the future, will probably not stick with those cuts. Why on earth are you and all of your colleagues why did you not catch the first plane or bus or car back to DC and be hounding your leadership, demanding that they get back to work?
Yes, well, thank you for the question. Speaker Boehner had a conference call with the conference yesterday. I did not personally ask the question, but questions were asked by colleagues of mine. And certainly there were those who suggested that we return to session immediately. And as I've indicated, I think in my opening remarks, I'd be happy to do that. And I've already told my wife it's debatable whether we're going to have even a couple of days together this summer. The lady in the back with the blonde hair, yes, how are you this evening?
My name is Mara Nigro from Berkeley Heights. I am one of your constituents.
Yes.
I am also a progressive member of MoveOn.org.
Yes.
And I'm very concerned about unemployment. And despite almost 10 years of tax cuts designed to stimulate the economy for the job creators, unemployment remains the highest it's been in many many, many decades, probably since the Great Depression.
Thank you,
And yet, corporate CEOs have seen their compensation increase exponentially so that the average Standard & Poor's 500 index company CEO makes $11.4 million a year. What's your question? Please don't be rude, and I promise not to be rude to you. They make $11.4 million a year on average, which is a 23% increase over what they paid themselves last year. It's also more than 300 times what the lowest employee in each of these companies.
Ask your
question. To use tax policy to influence economic growth as the tax cuts were intended to do. I believe it needs to be targeted so that...
Question. Ask your question. Come on, Al.
Thank you, Congressman. My question is...
Yay! All right, hold it down. Let the question go.
Would you support letting the existing Bush tax cuts and corporate subsidies expire this year and replacing them with cuts that are given only after a company can document that it has created a net increase in new jobs in this country?
I'd be happy to answer the question to the best of my ability. I do not favor raising taxes in any way, and I think that that issue has been settled for two...
I'm saying replacing the existing tax cuts.
I'll try to answer...
Wait, let the Congressman now answer your question.
Stop. About top CEO pay.
I do not...
Hold it down.
I do not favor raising taxes on anybody, and I think that issue has been decided through 2012. I personally believe that we should reform the tax code to close major loopholes, and I believe that is the best way to create jobs. And let me say, closing loopholes will not be easy, and many oxen would be gored. So I'm aware that this is not going to be easy. A member of the Tea Party from the district I serve.
Yeah, right here.
Sir.
Yes, Sal DiBianco, Warren, New Jersey. Warren. Member of the Somerset County Tea Party.
Yes, sir.
Can you explain to the people here the concept of baseline budgeting? I mean, I am so sick of hearing we've cut the budget, but then it increases.
Yes.
I mean, that's... Please explain.
The baseline is what the budget has been in the prior year, and it's complicated by the fact that in the bill we just passed, the baseline assumes, beginning in 2013, that all of the Bush tax cuts will have expired. And that, most people in Washington believe that means it's highly unlikely that the recommendations from the committee will include tax increases. But right now, sir, if we do nothing...
I'm talking about the concept.
Yes, well, the concept is based upon what is in current law.
Right.
And the baseline is based upon what is in current law. And current law in 2013 is that all of the Bush tax cuts have expired. Not only the tax cuts for those with family incomes of over $250,000 or individuals with income of over $200,000, it includes the assumption, the baseline assumes the assumption that all of the Bush tax cuts have expired, including those for middle-class people. Now, there are very few people in America, there are some, and there were some in my office this afternoon in Flemington, and I think Alan Greenspan may be among them, there are some who believe that all of the Bush tax cuts should expire. Between 2/3 and 3/4 of the Bush tax cuts, and it's debatable, but it's somewhere between 2/3 and 3/4, are for middle class people. I am here to tell you that there are not the votes in either House of Congress and either party to eliminate the Bush tax cuts for people in the middle class. It's simply, in my judgment, and maybe there'll be a debate on this next year, and maybe the president will have an opinion and his Republican opponent, but the baseline is based upon what is in current law, and current law states all of the Bush tax cuts expire at the end of 2000.
Is there any way that in the future, when you say the tax cuts, you can like freeze our spending at today's level? Is that possible?
I certainly think that is.
No one has ever talked about that.
Well, I think that is our goal, and in fact, our goal is to reduce spending as a percentage of gross domestic product. Now, whether that will reduce spending in real terms depends, I suppose, on gross domestic product. But gross domestic product has not been growing because of the extent of the recession. And
I mean, all of this, all of these things are, what you've done, and correct me if I'm wrong, is you've reduced the budget by 1%.
It will be greater than that over time, and in out years it will be greater. But
we have no guarantee that over time that's going to happen.
Absolutely true, and this is based upon the American Constitution. No Congress can bind a successor Congress.
That's why I got to do it now.
That is why. Like, you cannot bind a successor Congress. That is why, in my remarks at the beginning, I suggested that all in the room, Tea Party members, MoveOn.org members, that all in the room, in my judgment, should concentrate your energies on some sort of balanced budget amendment, your enthusiasm and your energy. And incidentally, let me repeat, I am not wedded to a single version of a balanced budget amendment. And my own preference, if I were Speaker of the House or Majority Leader of the Senate, would be percentage of gross domestic product. That apparently is not the preferred version at the moment, but that is my version. And I urge all of you to channel your enthusiasm in the next several months to analyzing seriously the balanced budget amendment proposals and which one you might prefer, and I'd be happy to meet with anybody who, after an analysis, has an informed opinion on it. The gentleman with the blue shirt.
Frank Van Dam from Mountainside,
Yes.
Morristown Tea Party.
Yes.
What is your idea on repealing the Davis-Bacon Act, which would save billions of dollars in federal spending?
I don't think that is possible, and I don't think that it could ever get through both.
Can I ask, what is the
Davis-Bacon Act is on wage rates.
Correct.
And I don't think that is possible. And there are two components. There's the Davis-Bacon Act, and then there's the Prevailing Wage Act. I don't think that is likely to occur. And I believe, and I could be wrong on this, but I believe President Reagan favored Davis-Bacon, I believe. And if I'm wrong, I'm sure someone will point that out to me. The gentleman in the white shirt, right here, sir.
Okay, I've got two questions. First of all, Glenn Miller, Morristown Tea Party. I live in Springfield.
Yes, sir.
Okay, the recent budget agreement. The recent budget agreement.
Yes, sir.
Didn't the budget go up 7% on the baseline over the next 10 years, adding several trillion more dollars to the budget, to the debt?
Certainly, it will go up, but it will not go up nearly as much as it would have gone up otherwise, and the baseline is significantly different as the result of the expiration of the Bush tax cuts, which I believe, and most experts believe in Washington, will lead to the conclusion that we should not be raising taxes.
One other question.
Sir, another question?
Okay,
Yes, sir.
you talk about creating jobs.
Yes.
We imported $400 billion worth of oil this year.
Yes.
Had it all been produced in the United States,
yes, sir.
Thousands of jobs would have been produced. Taxes would have accrued to every town, state, federal government throughout the United States. We wouldn't be sitting here today decrying the fact that that people are out of work, they can't meet their mortgages and everything else. And every election that I can remember, every politician says, well, even if you start drilling now, it won't happen for 4 years. I remember that 12 years ago. We could have been drilling and self-sufficient today.
I want to answer the gentleman's question. I agree with you completely. Having greater independence in energy is an economic issue for jobs, but even as important as that, and maybe more important than that, it is a national security issue. That terrible dictator, Hugo Chavez, lives on the oil profits that he gets, that Venezuela gets, from the United States of America, number one. Number two, in the Middle East, many of those countries are not our friends. We have to have greater energy independence. We've been talking about it for a long time, but our dependence on foreign oil is greater than it was a generation ago.
One accident, they shut down a whole industry over one accident.
I agree with you.
China had a training directly.
The question was on the shutdown of drilling in the Gulf based upon BP. I agree with you. On a bipartisan basis, the Congress, particularly those of us who serve on the Energy and Commerce Committee, have urged the Obama administration to repeal the moratorium more quickly. The young man in the blue shirt.
I'm James Malcolm from Watchung, not a member of the Tea Party or of Move On, not a Democrat or Republican. You're talking about the need to grow the economy and jobs is the most important thing we have, and how to get that, we have to have a degree of certainty. Then I ask, how is it in accordance with the idea that we need certainty for Congress and House leadership to take us to the brink of default by holding all the markets with their breaths held, waiting to see what would happen, by holding it out against revenue increases that something like 2/3 of the country said they supported?
My views are that we should not raise taxes. Let me say, I wish the compromise that had been reached a month before it was reached. And regarding President Obama, I wish that he had put an actual plan in writing. We put the Ryan budget on the table. It passed in the House, then it failed in the Senate. And it's very easy to criticize a plan, and the Ryan plan was not perfect, and I understand that. I try to be a student of American history. Can you imagine Franklin Roosevelt not putting a plan on the table? Can you imagine Lyndon Johnson not putting a plan on the table? Franklin Roosevelt created Social Security. Lyndon Johnson created Medicare. These were not plans that were basically the work product of a Congress. I believe they were plans that came from presidential administration. Mr. Boehner put a plan on the table, the Ryan budget, and then Mr. Boehner and the president negotiated, I think in good faith, came close, but it is my perspective, and certainly the perspective of Speaker Boehner, that it would have been better, and we would have reached an agreement earlier, not on the precipice, if the President of the United States had put a written plan on the table. Yes, right here.
Good job. Jeffrey Grant, Montgomery Tea Party, and Congressman Lance, I want to congratulate you on doing what I think is a very good job since the reelection. My question is more your opinion on a suggestion. And the scenario is, right now, we have a crisis. Whether you call it a debt crisis. My question is really a question. My question is really a suggestion, and I want your feedback on the suggestion. Right now, we have whatever you want to call it, a debt crisis, a spending crisis. Some people call it a revenue crisis, but it's a crisis. I want to quote the words from someone who I normally wouldn't want to quote, but that is, "Never let a good crisis go to waste."
I think the gentleman is now mayor of Chicago.
Doing good deeds there, I'm sure. The scenario is, if you add it all up, we really have a crisis of confidence. And that crisis of confidence comes from a crisis of leadership. Well, I'm not saying it's President Obama, probably is, but I'm not saying it's the Senate, probably is. I'm not saying it's Congress, well, it's probably, to a certain extent, everybody. But let's take advantage, here's the suggestion, is to take advantage of this crisis and imagine what would happen if Congress went back into session. What would happen to the world economic markets? What would happen to our stock market if Congress went back into session? If Congress went back into session, what would happen to the world economic climate if they went back to session and passed a balanced budget amendment now, instead of waiting?
I'm asked to repeat the question. The question is, what would happen if we went back into session now and passed a balanced budget amendment? I think it would have a dramatically positive effect, and I would favor that. I do not believe by pass you mean not only you mean pass it successfully. You have a two-thirds. Yes.
Two-thirds.
Yes.
Two-thirds.
Yeah. Well, as a practical matter, I do not think the votes exist today at the two-thirds level. And I'm just giving you my honest opinion. I hope over the next several months, given the enthusiasm of the American people and an explanation of a balanced budget amendment and a debate as to which of the balanced budget amendments we should pass, that the movement will be such that a balanced budget amendment can pass this autumn by the two-thirds vote that is required in both houses of Congress. This gentleman has been patiently waiting.
My name is Eric, Morristown Tea Party. If I have $250,000, how am I a millionaire? My banker says I'm not because I have $250,000 in assets and they made no money this year. What are they thinking? Where's this millionaire crap coming from?
I do not favor raising taxes on anybody. I think that issue has been decided through 2012. It is true that the committee could recommend that. I do not believe that it is likely. The gentleman with the dark glasses, yes.
Hi. I'm Richie Zappa, Woodbridge, New Jersey, Middlesex County Tea Party.
Yes.
My concern is more fundamental. I think that talking about creating jobs from Washington is not going to happen. It's been proved it's not going to happen. That we create the jobs.
I agree with that.
I own a pest control company. I had to lay people off. Okay, and that's because New Jersey passed 4,250 new regulations. You can't even read them all, okay, for pest control.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and the governor is working on eliminating some of that. But the problem is that redistribution of wealth seems to be the main focus of the administration. And that's why you have a failure of confidence. Because people are coming. Every time I try to make money, you want to redistribute it. That's the failure of confidence. We don't want to.
I think the question relates to, if I could paraphrase, you do not favor higher tax rates. Indeed, you favor lower tax rates.
Absolutely.
And what I have said is that what I liked, and the flat tax question, what I liked is the two rates that were agreed to in what I thought was an excellent compromise by Ronald Reagan, a strong Republican, and Bill Bradley and others, strong Democrats. Two tax rates, 15% and 28%, and that is the direction in which I would like to go. I'll take two more questions.
Can I choose the people?
This is the best news I've heard.